Welcome, everybody, to Congregation Va-Dor's Touch of Torah this Tuesday evening. It is December 6th, and I'd like to start off with a little video from a company called Godcast. And the parasha that we're going to be discussing for this Shabbat tonight and this Shabbat on Friday evening, December 9th and 10th, we'll be talking about Vayishlach. So I'm going to show that right now.
The story of Jacob is a story of a character who changes. When we first met Jacob, he was doing things like tricking his brother Esau, tricking his blind father, and tricking his uncle out of several hundred sheep. But now it's years later, and he hears that his twin brother Esau, the one whose inheritance he stole so many years ago, is coming to meet him, along with a security detail of 400 men. The night before this confrontation, the Torah tells us that a man wrestled with Jacob until daybreak. And then we're told, when the man saw that Jacob was winning, he wrenched Jacob's hip at its socket. Then the man says to Jacob, "Let me go, because dawn is breaking," as though he were some sort of zombie who can't be seen by the light of day. Jacob tells the man that he won't release him unless the man blesses him. But instead of blessing him, the man who injured him changes him, telling him, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel," which means wrestles with God, because you have struggled with God and men and succeeded. Jacob then asks the man what his name is, but the man responds, "Why do you ask me my name?" And then the man leaves. Jacob understands that something important has happened, though he doesn't yet know what. He names the place Peniel, or the face of God, meaning, as he puts it, "I have seen God face to face, and my life has been preserved." As Jacob limps off into the sunrise on his damaged hip, we see something in him that we've never seen before: humility. And then he meets his brother Esau. Before this wrestling match, Jacob probably would have avoided Esau somehow. But now Jacob bows to the ground 7 times at Esau's feet. Esau falls on his neck to kiss him, and the two brothers weep. Then Jacob tells Esau, "To see your face is to see the face of God." Who is this mysterious stranger who wrestled with Jacob? The Torah goes out of its way not to tell us, of course. The most common explanation is that Jacob was, quote, "wrestling with an angel." I find this hard to believe, because a few chapters back, Jacob met a whole slew of angels climbing up a ladder, and the text wasn't afraid to tell it straight. Another possibility is that this wrestling match is a metaphor for Jacob wrestling with his own conscience. It's an intriguing idea, but the story is a bit too physical for that. I can't remember the last time my conscience dislocated my hip. Which brings me to who this mysterious man really is. I think it's Esau. This is a physical reenactment of Jacob's first moments, when, as the text told us, Jacob and Esau wrestled each other in their mother's womb. Now Esau has his opportunity to finish that first wrestling match, knowing all that Jacob has done to wrong him since then, but also knowing how time and life can change what matters most to us. Esau comes by night, so Jacob won't recognize him, but Jacob does know who this man is. He names the place Peniel because "I have seen God face to face." When he meets Esau, he tells him that to see your face is like seeing the face of God. Jacob knows at that moment that the way we see God on earth is by facing the people we've wronged, by looking into their faces and knowing that we can change.
Okay, Rabbi, it's all yours.
All right, thanks. Well, it's an interesting video you showed. I always like watching videos. I think it's a fun and entertaining way to share ideas and stories from the Bible. Sometimes they're accurate, sometimes not. I'm not quite sure why Jacob and Esau look so bizarre. Esau's got these weird fang-like teeth, and Jacob looks pretty odd. I'm not sure why. I also don't agree with the explanation, nor do most rabbis and most commentators who have taken a look at the story. It seems rather obvious who the person is or the stranger is that he's wrestling with, because he's given the name afterwards Yisrael, one who wrestles with God. So it seems rather clear he was wrestling with God, and the entity that he was wrestling with was God. Also, the place is called Peniel, which means the face of God. So it seems rather obvious that that was a place where he encountered God. So there doesn't seem to be too much question about that in the eyes of most commentators, and just the simple explanation of the story itself seems to make that clear. There's a lot of explanations about what the story actually means as far as wrestling with God, the dislocated hip, and these things. Some of these things are just chalked up to ancient mythologies and things that have been lost in antiquity. But the wrestling with God, which is the name given to the Jewish people, Yisrael, that's something which is quite profound and cries out for an explanation. The explanation about wrestling with one's conscience is a good one. Each one of us, as we go through life, we're constantly wrestling with our conscience, and the conscience can be described as a little mechanism that's implanted within us that comes from a higher source, or that calls us to more ethical actions. And so it's a good explanation that perhaps he was wrestling with his conscience. I like to explain it this way. There's a scientific principle called Occam's razor, and that is that if you have many different explanations, go with the simplest one, the most direct one, not the most convoluted one. And chances are that's going to be the correct one. So Yisrael, he wrestled with God. What's the most easily understood explanation for that? Well, it's the Jewish people that are wrestling with God, because it's Yisrael, and that's the name for the Jewish people. Many people get confused. They think Israel is the name of a place, which it is, but the name of the place comes from the use of Israel from way, way before 1948. We were always referred to as Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, and Israel is the name of Jacob. And so Israel means historically the Jewish people. So what does that mean, that the Jewish people wrestle with God? The explanation that I like to employ, especially from a perspective of cosmic Judaism, is this. Jews have been wrestling with the concept of God since day one. We've been trying to understand it, trying to grapple with it, trying to confront our beliefs about God. In the beginning, we thought God was very angry and violent, and we needed to placate him with sacrifices, otherwise he'd be mad at us and kill us. So we gave him sacrifices. According to Einstein, then, our understanding of God evolved to see God as a father figure who would reward the good and punish the bad. And you can see this all over the Bible. If you obey my word, it will rain when it's supposed to, the crops will yield their fruit, you'll vanquish your enemies, and if you disobey me, watch out. Everything's going to go wrong. So that was the next phase, from fear of a monster type figure to a father figure. And then Einstein says that in modern times, once in a while, we get a glimpse of something wondrous and miraculous in contemplating the world and the universe around us. It could be we're sitting in nature and we get a feeling of awe and majesty and wonder. Could be we listen to a beautiful piece of music or inspirational words, or perhaps we're with our parents, our father, our mother, and they fill us with love and we get this overwhelming positive feeling, or a memory that we have of them, or we're inspired by a good cause, or we see a transcendent feeling that makes us feel that there's a little more to this world than just the physical, what meets the eye. It doesn't mean that it's supernatural. It just means that the natural is super, and that this life is indeed quite wondrous, and we don't always appreciate that. So wrestling with God means that the concept that we have of God is always evolving, adapting, improving. As the knowledge of humanity increases, we are able to better understand the concept of God, which is really the concept of how everything got here, the creative power that's in everything and beyond everything and unites everything, and the power that has the ability to transform what is into what could be, and perhaps with the help of positive religion, what should be. So for me, Yisrael, struggles with God, means that our people has always been questioning, challenging, struggling to understand the concept of this creative power and how we can live in harmony with it and the universe, and how we can learn to treat each other. Jacob indeed seems to be transformed after this encounter. As the little video indicated, before he was highly deceptive. He deceived his father, Isaac, to get the blessing. He deceived his brother Esau to get the birthright, offering him some food in exchange for the birthright. His father-in-law, Laban, he deceived in order to come out with extra sheep. But after that encounter with God, or his conscience, or this creative force that's within him, he changed. He was more direct, and he sought forgiveness. He acknowledged his faults and his sins, and he attempted to reconcile with his brother, not by deception, but by being direct and approaching him and seeking forgiveness. This approach worked. His brother did reconcile with him. And then it says something else that's quite spectacular. He says to his brother, "Seeing your face is like seeing the face of God." And so you could say that he now was under the influence of this higher power within him to do good and to be a better person. And seeing his face, like seeing the face of God, could be interpreted as meaning when we are able to make peace with others, especially with others with whom we've been estranged, when we can heal wounds and reconcile. That's a godly act. Personally, I don't believe in a physical entity called God. I see God as a process, an evolving process of manifesting this creative power in this universe. And therefore, this process should lead us towards love and reconciliation. And so that's what godliness is all about from a modern perspective. Other Jews see it quite differently, and that's okay. So that's the main part of the story, the grappling with God and the reconciliation. Other Jews also have grappled with God. Abraham, in the very beginning, challenged God when he was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and argued with him and struggled with him. Instead of just saying, sure, destroy these people, just as long as I'm safe, I don't really care. He didn't. He argued with God for the sake of justice. And Moses did also. When God threatened to destroy the Jewish people, Moses challenged him, and God relented. So what it means to be Jewish is not just to obey and follow orders, it's to challenge any authority, no matter what, in the interest of justice and fairness and compassion to other people. Those are my thoughts on the passage. I'd be interested in hearing yours. And then I'd also like to talk about the current events, which we're going to find out about later tonight when we get the results from Georgia, which is on everybody's mind. We got Georgia on our mind right now, and interested in hearing about that too. But let's see if anybody has any comments that they'd like to share about the Torah passage.
Let me unmute you, Jim. Okay, you're unmuted, Jim. Go ahead.
I think a lot about what you just went over and what was in the Old Testament of Torah was about redemption. Okay? I think that it's hard the way people are now for them to have redemption. Everybody's either on the left or on the right. But in this case, like you said, they actually got down in the trenches and they went to battle and they changed the attitude, and there was redemption there, and the brothers were back together. That's my take.
When you say redemption, what do you mean by that? Like making yourself whole or resolving things? Is that what you're talking about?
Resolving things and being able to change the hatred or whatever you might call it and get back together on the basis of forgiving and redemption.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's the major focus of this passage. And if God is to mean anything, God is constantly, the universe and we and everything is constantly changing, hopefully for the better. So what you're suggesting is there was a change of attitude from anger to love, from wanting vengeance to atonement and forgiveness. And that change of attitude is really what the power of God is all about. So I agree 100% with your interpretation of the Torah reading and the importance of it. And applying it to today, many of us have many people that we're at odds with. It could be for political reasons or religious reasons or family reasons, or maybe it's for some ridiculous, nonsensical reason that we don't even remember anymore. And the passage is trying to tell us that if you should undergo a process where you try to change. Don't be so entrenched, and seek forgiveness, because reconciling with others, it's like seeing the face of God. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very well spoken.
Thank you. Anybody else have any thoughts about it? Yeah, Valerie, go ahead.
Well, I think in general, what it's talking about is emotional and conscious evolution and the ability for humankind, or mankind, if you will, to be more rational and think reasonably. So it's an overall evolution of consciousness, because we were almost like barbarians at one point. And so, there's an enlightenment there that as a whole, as humankind is starting to evolve into a higher level of being.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with those sentiments as well. Anybody else want to share some thoughts? By the way, I always have to throw in that, of course, I don't take the Torah as the literal word of God, and I can give you examples, chapter and verse, one from this passage. Well, after the wrestling match, this voice says to Jacob, from now on, your name is going to be changed to Israel, Yisrael, and you will not be called Jacob anymore. And then 5 verses later, God is calling him and he's saying, Yaakov, Yaakov. So he just said, you'll never be called Jacob again. And God himself is calling him Jacob, like 5 verses later. The Orthodox have a lot of trouble trying to explain that. Of course, once you just say, well, it wasn't written by God, it was written by people and they messed up, then you don't have any explaining to do. It's very simple. But if you say God wrote it, then you have to come up with some crazy explanations like they do, which is that for God, there's no sense of time. The future, the past, the present are all mixed. So even though it's 5 passages later, it's really before, it's all convoluted. But it's a pretty funny and striking example of something that clearly is an error in the Torah. And he's also called Jacob in other phases later on in his life that are irrefutable, that happened later and by different people. So he says, you'll never be called Jacob again, and he still was. But the name was changed to Yisrael, one who struggles with God, and that's why we're called the children of Israel, B'nai Yisrael. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments? Stanley, go ahead.
I think sometimes in today's world, 2 people have different views, and maybe they're at odds, maybe they hate each other. Sometimes it takes a mediator to bridge that gap, or try to come to terms with why the one side and the other can't meet in the middle somewhere. I mean, this is current events. I had a conversation just the other day about something that I had set in my mind, but the other person pointed out other considerations that I hadn't really paid attention to. So yes, you can make people get along with each other, but I don't think it's so easy. I think you sometimes need help.
Well, I would say that what this passage is trying to say is that it's embarrassingly easy. All you have to do is give up your sense of anger over what somebody did and start over and just say, I forgive you. All you have to do is just, if the two people want to reconcile, they'll reconcile. These two couldn't have been any more at odds with each other. They were so angry at each other. Jacob thought he was going to be killed. He stole the birthright. He deceived him. But Jacob just said, I'm sorry, I apologize. And Esau had the desire to reconcile, and that's how it was. The only time it requires a mediator, if the people are too stubborn to do that on their own and they need someone to do it for them. But unless the two people actually really want to reconcile, even the best mediator is going to have difficulty doing that. One of the classic examples of when a mediator did help was the reconciliation between Begin and Sadat, who had fought wars against each other and were implacable enemies. And then President Carter served as a mediator, and he brought them together. And without Carter, it probably wouldn't happen. In fact, the two of them called upon Carter and said, we need help here. We need intervention, help us out. And they went to Camp David, and they spent a long time together. And Carter went out of his way to do an incredible job of bringing peace for Israel and Egypt, which was an incredible benefit to Israel. If there was not a peace treaty with Egypt, there might not even be an Israel today, because then Egypt was no longer fighting against Israel. Later on, President Carter took a very hostile position towards Israel, and his library was financed in large part by Saudi Arabia, which very well could explain all of that, which was very unfortunate. But at Camp David, he did a superhuman job in bringing about peace and reconciliation. And as well as Begin and Sadat, Sadat risked his life to make peace, and he was eventually killed. Begin risked his political support from very conservative types who thought he sold out. And also he risked being assassinated too. So there's a lot of courage by both of them. And the movie Begin, which we saw at the Lakes of Del Rey, was amazing. And it's all about his life history. And we're going to try to get it shown again. So if we can, definitely try to see it. Anybody else? All right. Oh, Harris, go ahead.
Okay, I'm changing the subject.
Okay.
Harry Truman never graduated college. I don't know if you know that or not. And he did a great job. And Walker, he never graduated college, and he has no experience, and half the population voted for him. I don't get it. Explain it to me.
Well, Walker definitely doesn't walk the walk. There's no doubt about that. But it's pretty easy to explain Walker's popularity. It's the same as the Republican Party. These are people that are entrenched and will vote for anyone who promises more guns, less abortion, less civil rights, more anti-Semitism. I mean.
Okay, I got it. Okay. Yeah, I just couldn't figure it out. When I looked him up, it said he quit college to play football. And
well, you know, I think as Jim was saying, college isn't all that it's cracked up to be. I mean, college is good for some people, but not for other people. And I don't know that everybody needs to go to college at all. You can learn a lot of great stuff outside of college. So to me, that's not really a big factor one way or the other. It's not even any factor one way or the other. But, you know, I think the problem today is this, it's like Esau and Jacob. I mean, we are entrenched, and there's a lot of hostility and anger towards each other based on politics, and it's really unhealthy. It represents a rot. in our society. And this story hopefully could be a catalyst towards people reconciling. Like maybe people have said words to each other that are pretty hostile, but who the heck cares if somebody disagrees with you politically? Just forget about it and reconcile with them. Why be angry with each other? It doesn't make any sense at all.
How can you change that, Rabbi? How can you change that attitude? And this started when Trump got in. Okay, this is when it started. So how are we going to be able to change it?
Well, I agree with you. It did start with him, and he served as a catalyst to bring out a lot of the divisiveness in society, and he exacerbated it, like throwing oil on a fire. But I think that the way to change it would have to come from a place that has kind of been like we call hors de combat. It hasn't been involved at all. And that's the religious community. I mean, you have people fighting against each other and people trying to take over the government, and the religious community is pretty much silent. The religious community is supposed to be the group that helps people reconcile and brings about love and peace and harmony. It's been totally silent. So my dad used to say that there's no reason why we should have a dislike for the unlike. Just because someone has a different point of view doesn't mean that we should dislike them. And we tend to think today that if someone doesn't agree with us, then they're our enemy, or we have to be hostile to. And certainly Trump believed that. But there's a lot of people on the other side who also have that same point of view. I think what we need to understand is that having differences of opinion shouldn't cause us not to like somebody. It's like, okay, maybe somebody likes a different flavor ice cream than we do. Are we going to make them our enemy? And let's say that we think somebody is doing harmful things, or maybe they're believing things that are going to cause harm to the country. Is the best way to approach that person really with hostility and anger? Or wouldn't it be to try approach them and talk about things in a respectful way? So the way to cure this problem is to get rid of the dislike of the unlike, to try to get religion on board with encouraging peace and harmony and reconciliation, which it's supposed to do, instead of trying to say, God loves me and he hates all you people because you disagree. You see, if you have a religion that posits that there's a God who is going to send everyone who agrees with that God to heaven, and everyone who disagrees, they're going to be sent to hell for eternal damnation, then what you're worshiping is the most intolerant figure that you could imagine. And therefore, if you believe that, if you want to be God-like, then you also should make enemies of those people who disagree and want to send them to hell and do all these horrible things to them. But if you worship an intolerant God, you become intolerant. So the religions have to be transformed so that they're no longer worshiping a God who rewards you and punishes everybody else. The God should be seen as a creative power that is inside of all of us. And we all emerge from this creative power. We're all one family. And when we transform religious thinking in that way, then we can solve any problem, even without a mediator. The problem is that the religions of the world show no inclination to make such a change at this point. That's why we at Va-Dor, we hold that view and we try to promote it to others and try to help get a spiritual transformation. And there are others who share that point of view, the Unitarians, the Baha'i, and many branches of Christianity and of Judaism and of other religions, Hindu and Buddha. We need to form a coalition with all these various religions that believe that this power within us should incline us to build bridges of understanding and knock down walls of separation. That's what the Temple of Understanding is all about, which we're a constituent part of. And I believe that every religion should go beyond its own borders and not just deal with people of their own background, but should reach out to build bridges with others. That's what the Temple of Understanding does. And if your religion is only confined to dealing with people like you and your religion, and you're not mixing it up with others, then you're really just wasting everybody's time.
Right. I agree.
Anybody else want to share any thoughts about any of that?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
A couple parshas ago, Isaac, he had the people, as he was digging these wells of water, he had these people who were very mean, and they could have attacked him and everything, but they took over the wells. And one of the things you said was, make your enemies your friends, and that's what we need to do. So there's another golden rule, or another goal from this parsha, similar to what Isaac did, was he invited them to his home. He invited them to a feast. He made peace with them. He didn't get angry because they told him he couldn't, they took over his wells that he had labored to build. So make your enemies your friend. And that's what we need to do more of in this country.
That's exactly right. The best way to defeat an enemy is to make him your friend. And he's not an enemy anymore. And you've won. But most people think you got to clash head on. But you're right. Isaac set an example by his restraint, by his intelligence, his ability to find wells. And they looked at him as if he was a blessed figure. That's what we need to do. If somebody's getting angry, instead of getting angry back at them and dragging each other down, if we can rise above that and set an example of peacefulness and tolerance and restraint, then maybe they'll look at us differently and say, oh, I guess this person's not so bad after all. Now, there are times when you have to fight back. That clearly would not have worked with confronting the Nazis or other implacable foes. Sometimes you have to fight back or you'll be killed. But in many instances, most instances, you don't have to engage in fisticuffs, or you don't have to engage in aggressiveness. You can seek a different path. And yes, Isaac followed in those footsteps. And the reason why he didn't get angry, and the reason why Jacob didn't get angry, is because they were nomads. So there was no mad bone in their body. That's why. Anybody else want to share some thoughts? Go ahead, Harris.
I thought the worst president for Israel was FDR, okay, without a doubt. And I thought the best was Donald Trump, having the Abraham Accords, putting all those countries in with Israel. That's one great thing that he did. And we have to marvel at that.
Yeah, well, of course, FDR preceded Israel. But if you're talking about the best friend of the worst person towards the Jewish people and the nascent state of Israel, I'd be inclined to agree with you. What he did was unconscionable and unpardonable. That he refused to allow Jews into Israel and into the United States. He had to have been the worst president ever for the Jewish people, because nobody else had the opportunity to bring people in and just slam the door closed. That was,
and he turned that ship away too, with all those Jews in it.
Yeah, it's totally unforgivable. As far as Trump is concerned, Trump did some things that clearly were helpful to Israel. He did other things that were extremely harmful to Israel, not the least of which was to call climate change a hoax, which according to Israeli scientists represents the greatest threat to Israel of all, because the Mediterranean rises, Israel would be underneath the water.
Absolutely, so you're absolutely right.
Yeah, but he did, I agree with you, he did some things that were incredible towards Israel. The recognition of the Golan, the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and also the shutting off of funds to Palestinians that were engaged in terrorist acts against Israel was something that should have been done a long time ago. And
why did he do that?
Why
did he do that? He's not Jewish.
Yeah, the reason why he did it is because his base is fundamentalist Christians. And the fundamentalist Christians
are pro-Israel.
Great fans of Israel. Not because they necessarily like the Jewish people so much, but according to their eschatological view,
Yes.
Jesus is going to come back when Armageddon happens, and Armageddon's going to happen in Israel, and the Jewish people are going to play a major role in that. So they've got to try to get the Jewish people back into Israel for this chess game to take place. And then what's going to happen is, in their view, the armies of all the world are going to converge in Israel, and they're going to destroy the place. And all the Jews are going to be killed, all of them, except for 144,000. There'll be 12,000 from each tribe who are going to see the light, convert, accept Jesus, and they'll live happily ever after, like all the rest of the Jews and virtually all the rest of humanity, except for people who believe in Jesus. They're all going to die and go to hell and burn in hell forever. That's their idea of a good time. So, but they certainly have ulterior motives.
You forgot his son-in-law.
Yeah, his son-in-law, right?
Right.
Yeah. So tonight is a big night, big night for the United States, and it looks to me like Walker is going to go down in flames. That's my prediction. It looks like people are starting to wake up, and he's just an embarrassment. I think he's going to head out, and I think he's going to lose. But I'm interested in what anybody else has to say about that.
He's a prop. He's a prop for the Republicans. That's what he is.
Yeah.
He's had all these people, Lindsey Graham, Cruz,
yeah,
Senator Kennedy. They don't want him to answer any questions, so they're right there where they can interpret what they're going to do. What they want is for him to get elected, and then they can do what they want to with him. They can tell him when to vote. And by the way, he's not the only stupid person in there. They also got a football coach that coached at Auburn. His name is Tommy Tuberville. He is a senator, and he came out about 6 months ago with all the stupid stuff that you could come up with, saying Democrats wanted crime. They wanted Black lives to take over. So he's not the first one, but he is the most stupid that they've ever had.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's incredible the candidates that they put up with just based on whether they'll back Trump's big lie. They're really humiliating themselves. And that's the other thing about Trump and Israel. The fact that the Jewish people have backed Trump and that many in Israel like Trump, I think is one of the most harmful things to the state of Israel you can imagine, because it just, anybody associated with Trump starts to look really, really bad and starts to look really, really corrupt. And the association of Israel and Jewish people with Trump will do incalculable harm to the reputation of the Jews, just as it does harm to anyone else. And what Lindsey Graham has to show is that an ounce of deception is worth a gram of hypocrisy. That's what Lindsey Graham shows us.
Me and my wife agree with you so much. That's why I'm on this.
Well, it's a pleasure to listen to you, Jim, and and your wife. It's great to see you there. And I think we're ready to wrap this session up. Okay. It was great having you both. And thank you for tuning in, and thank you everybody else. And there will be a link on our website from this so that people can watch. You can tell your friends later. We usually get lots of people watching the link. So thank you everybody for participating. It was great having you on, and I hope to see you again soon in the future.